Thank you for joining us today as we discuss the industry confidence in the short-term rental ecosystem. Quickly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Amiad Soto, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of short-term rental property management platform, Guesty. Joining us today are prominent thought leaders from the global travel and short-term rental ecosystem. Please welcome Travis Riner of Homes and Villas by Marriott International, Robin Clifford of Nestor, and Pierre Becerril of Transparent. Thank you again for your participation. This afternoon, our panelists will discuss what lies ahead for the short-term rental industry and strategies they have implemented to navigate this challenging period. We'll reveal exclusive data from our report on confidence in the industry, and we'll cover the path for recovery, 2021 predictions and trends, and more. We'll then begin our live panel discussions and conclude with an interactive Q&A featuring questions from our audience. One of the most prominent side effects of COVID-19 has been a complete lack of predictability, felt by the world at large and, of course, by everyone within the travel industry. It's the reason for the monumental uptick in last-minute bookings and the reason hosts and property management companies everywhere are increasingly offering flexible cancellation policies. It's not a question of whether or not travel will recover, it will, but the exact timing of when and the how are still question marks. That said, with vaccine distribution underway worldwide and the light at the end of the tunnel in sight, we can make informed predictions about the future. With that goal in mind, we surveyed over 500 players within our hospitality ecosystem to help us shape an educated forecast of what's to come. I'll take you through a few key insights from that report, all of which you can read through the report we crafted based on our findings. I'll share the link later, and you can also grab the report on Guesty.com. Note that the majority of respondents, almost 63%, are property managers and property management companies or professional hosts. Key insights. When it comes to the exact timing of recovery, over half of the respondents placed it in 2022. The top three factors all survey respondents are concerned with delay the recovery of travel are: 1, longer vaccine distribution times in certain countries and populations; 2, reduced ability to spend on travel due to economic hits taken during the pandemic; 3, lingering customer hesitance to travel despite the vaccine. And throughout, we might not see a full normalization of travel this year. The summer months are looking promising. In fact, I can share with you that the booking volume in the US for June through August is 110% higher than what we saw this time last year, and even in 2019. Moving on to the next key insight. Consumer booking patterns have been largely impacted by ongoing events. For example, second strain lockdowns and recently vaccine efficacy announcements. Case in point, 35% of the professional hosts and property management companies we surveyed have already seen an uplift in 2021 reservation volume following the announcements of vaccine efficacy. Some have reported increases of as much as 75 to 100%. This tells us that a lot about the impact of vaccine distribution on consumer confidence when it comes to travel. People kept traveling during COVID, of course, and those who perhaps would have never considered a rental in the past opted to stay in one, considering the privacy rental offers, the lack of common areas such as lobbies and elevators, and that there are less high-touch services. And it looks like these short-term rental converts are here to stay. 83.2% of Guesty survey respondents feel the short-term rental industry, vacation rentals and Airbnbs, has won over hotel goers, and that this new user base doesn't plan on booking traditional hotel stays once COVID-19 is behind us. Additionally, the majority of those surveyed believe that hotel business models will shift and hotel will increasingly incorporate alternative accommodation options, such as short-term rentals, into their business models, and will purchase property management companies to expand their offering. As we look forward to that recovery, we must still prepare ourselves for that time that stands between then and now, and implement the right tools and strategies to help us remain agile in order to navigate what remains of this unique period. We asked professional hosts and property management companies we surveyed to identify the tech solutions that have proven most valuable to their business during the pandemic, and tools aimed to simplify cleaning, marketing, and distribution, and revenue management were all high on that list. with property management software topping it off. Which lead us to Guesty. Guesty has built with the understanding that professional hosts and property management companies have a ton of tasks to accomplish on a daily basis. Whether it be staff management, issuing reports to homeowners, or handling guest communication, our software provides solutions that help them automate these tasks in order to save valuable time so they can focus on what matters most, maintaining stability and ultimately longevity of their business. Throughout COVID-19, our automation technology and ability to streamline and centralize operations has been a massive asset to property management companies, making it easier for them to quickly pivot their business, work remotely, and function with leaner teams. So it's important to note that our software is a one-stop shop, where property managers can handle everything in one place, tapping into tools including automation and smart home technology. With that, I'd like to pass the torch here to Pierre.
So today, I'm going to be presenting a high-level view of what's going on in the industry, always trying to get sort of the macro. And I think some of the other panelists may be going down to micro and some actual tips on how it goes. So let me start with the high picture that I like to bring today, which is answering the question of how big are short-term rentals compared to hotels. And I can't help myself but doing the comparison, because I think it's important to put things into context, right? So in this chart, what we've done is we've put the number of our hotel rooms in the x-axis, right? And on the y-axis, we've only put the number of rentals, right? And what you see in this chart is basically there's a number of dots that are above the green line that actually have more rentals than hotels. So this is the case in France, where 67% of the rooms are actually in a rental. So what that tells me is that basically our industry is super important in terms of inventory and how big the industry is compared to the overall hospitality industry. And I think this is very important to keep in mind when we speak about our industry in general. We're a very vast and diversified industry that serves urban market, leisure market that is very capillary and helps cater the needs of a lot of travelers. So putting things into perspective, in certain markets we're even bigger than the hotel industry, right? And we know this didn't come overnight, but if we look actually at the growth of the inventory of the last 3 years, to put things into perspective, I think it's quite impressive to see that at global level, 3.4 million rooms have been added over the last 3 years. And to put things in order of comparison, because these are very big numbers, imagine all of the hotels in Italy, Germany, France, and Spain together, put together in 3 years. And that's what the industry that we are in actually added in just 3 years, right? As you can see here, and I know it's a little bit blurred by the pop-up, but basically, COVID haven't really had a huge impact on supply, and most of what was active has actually remained active. So by active, we mean that properties are searchable and that you can actually see the properties. I think that's quite important to see that our industry is still very vast and large in terms of inventory. Now I want to speak a little bit about demand, and obviously what we were showing here is the impact of the COVID crisis on the overall number of bookings. So you see here it's a per week basis, and it's basically everything since beginning of last year. So you see one full year of COVID in one picture, and this is by areas or by continent if you want. So what this chart tells us is that there is a lot of volatility in the market, but I think that the silver lining here is that basically we are able as an industry to react much faster than other travel industries. So I'll talk about it in a minute, but basically what that shows is that as soon as the recovery is possible, made possible by the regulation, by the restriction, it actually happens. And that's, I think, very positive. One important impact and one thing that we've seen has changed is the evolution of lengths of stay. So, everybody, I think at this stage knows that lengths of stay tend to be higher, but one positive signal towards the recovery could be the fact that lately we've seen actually lengths of stay going slightly down and aiming towards normalization. And I think that's a positive signal. Obviously, these are averages, so it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of 30-day stay or a lot of weekly stays. But overall, what we see is that there are also some shorter stays that are being booked at the moment, and I think that shows some confidence towards some normalization, even though we're still not there. All right. Now I wanted to show you another chart that I find super interesting on ADRs. Basically, what this shows, and that's super I mean, this is very impressive for our industry, which is basically that the ADRs have maintained really solid. And this is extremely positive. You know, if you look at the hotel industry in the US, I was reading a report by a hotel data company called STR that, you know, rates have really dropped a lot compared to pre-COVID. And if you look into, you know, what happened in the vacation rental space, rates have actually been holding up pretty good. And again, these are averages. So in some markets, it's true that rates are, you know, lower than before, especially urban markets. But overall, you know, overall industry shows that rates have actually maintained pretty strong. And I think that's actually very positive. One thing that we've seen as well is that obviously urban, I just mentioned it, you know, are more affected. And if you see the share of total stays in urban are still lower than they used to be. You can see the 2020 numbers were still, you know, below 2019, even though there's some silver lining as well here, where you see at the end of the year, we had actually, you know, some recovery in urban stay and total market share, which I think is also positive, which means that there is demand for this kind of destination. It's just not the right time. Another point here that I wanted to discuss some normalization again here. So we've seen overall booking window going down. If you see the 2021 number over here, you've seen that during the year, basically booking window, what I call booking window for everybody is basically the same thing as lead time, which is the difference in time before when the reservation is made and when the check-in. So basically what that says is that, you know, the average has been going down. And at the end of the year, we were around 30 days. So people booking close to the date. Again, this is averages. So it means some people book, you know, for the day after and some book, you know, for next summer or 360 days ahead. But overall, the trend has been going downwards, even though lately we've seen some normalization in booking window. And we attribute that to the fact that now we're seeing the books getting solid for summer and driving booking window up. And so before I go to the US, just to show you what's going on in Europe, this is basically what the reservation change year on year looks like. Europe is still very depressed. You know, we've not really reached the second inflection point, if you want. There's a lot of strict regulation and strict, let's say, sanitary measures that blocks travels pretty much everywhere. In the UK, we've had some great announcements that have actually freed up the reservation stream and actually generated some reservation. I'm sure Robin can talk a little bit about that. But basically, we're still down in Europe. The total volume that Europe is generating on, if you see the market share of global short-term rental, we're basically half of what Europe was generating, you know, normal years before pandemic. So we are actually shrink importance globally, but this is mostly due to, you know, punctual measures due to the pandemic. And in the US, we see also some states that are doing pretty well. Overall, I'd say, you know, a lot of leisure markets are actually performing pretty well in the US. So this is very encouraging in general for the industry. And I'm gonna wrap up. I got a few more slides, but I'll go quickly over them. Basically, I wanted to show that, you know, urban markets are still depressed. If you look at August, you know, the share of urban has actually decreased further. And we think that it's gonna last at least a few more months before we really recover. Obviously, now demand is extremely domestic. This chart shows how much of the demand for each of these countries were domestic and how it has changed in 2020. So you see in September 2019, for instance, in Spain, we had around 27% of domestic demand. And the year after, we were actually up to 67. So 2 out of 3 travelers in Spain were domestic when they used to be, you know, much less. And that happens everywhere. Basically, domestic is the dominance. And if you see this, it's actually even stronger now that restrictions are tougher than last summer. So you see the share of domestic is now 86% overall. So we're still dominated by a very domestic market. And I have a chart I really like to show, which is the total capacity. I borrowed that from one of our friends, a good company that does airline data called Forward Keys. And basically what that shows is the number of total international seats you know, are still down by 80%. And that's for Europe only, but it's similar all over, right? So what that means is that, you know, when 10 planes used to fly, now we've got only 2 of them and they're not even full. So obviously the industry is sort of, you know, one leg without the international demand. And that obviously impacts, you know, the overall reservation. But there is some caveat because when flights reopen, like this is the case, this is an example of US arrivals to Mexico, which I think is very interesting. Actually, there is this sort of path for demand, and you can see the recovery. And these are this is transparent data that shows you the number of US short-term rental check-ins done in Mexico. And if you add to that longer lengths of stay, you can see actually nice numbers, especially in Cancun, for instance, a destination that have recovered really strongly. So with this, just to show you some different markets here, basically this chart shows the percentage of reservation compared to 2019. So below the 0%, we're still much below, and above is actually doing better than last year. So we've got some market like than 2019. So market like Fort Myers that are doing pretty well, but other urban markets that are still very depressed. So with all of that, I just wanted to wrap up with a few conclusions here. One, to say, our inventory and our industry is very strong. We have very strong supply and we compete really well with hotels. We have a strong momentum, and as soon as travel can be done, we are the first to recover. And that's super important. And I think our momentum is amazing. And that's one of the reasons why Airbnb went public last year. Another point that is very positive is that domestic and leisure markets are dominating and are working well with the new seasonality imposed by travel restrictions. So what we can see in general, that's the last point, is that everything is very volatile, and that there are punctual recoveries hitting certain markets as soon as the regulation allows it. Right? And that's it for me. So I've got just a lot of content on our website. We're a data company. We provide a recovery tracker on our website on ctransparent.com, and we're also happy to have a chat with every one of you. If you want to have a chat separately, you can book a time with our team or with myself on the website.
Thank you, Pierre. I'd like to pass the torch here to Robin.
I'm Robin. I'm the head of expansion for Nestor, a property management business based in London. I joined Nestor in October, and before then I head up the supply for Airbnb for 5 years across 80 countries. So Nestor, we're a property management company, as I said, based in London, operating service departments and homes for institutional landlords and private investors. We're the world's first property management company to be a professional co-host of Airbnb, which was 3 years ago, due to a high level of service for landlords and guests alike. And we work with large corporate agents, including Grosvenor and some big estate agents in the UK. Our business is mainly at the moment based in the UK, Ireland and Spain, with some plans for expansion to other markets, which I can touch on later. So for the agenda today, we're going to discuss the future of travel, so touching on international travel, staycations and digital nomads, the strategies to navigate change, so pricing and rate plans and property appeal. And then lastly, how to appeal your property to families, groups and digital nomads to make sure that you convert your traffic on OTAs on your direct booking channel also. So international travel. So vaccine is the key to the recovery of international travel. And at the moment, as you can see from this chart, per capita, Israel, the UAE and the UK are the three market leaders in terms of vaccination per capita. Good news for Nestor, because a lot of our business is based in the UK, and we've already seen an upward trajectory since the 12th, since the last announcement that the market was opening up more in the UK, because the vaccination program has been very successful. I added in a kind of a crystal ball in terms of the future of travel. And one thing before the co-working Airbnb, there's a sense that everybody likes to travel and they want to travel. There's two reasons why people don't travel. One is because it's cost. The cost of doing so is quite high, and also it's the time for traveling. It takes a long time, particularly international travel. And I think that things like airports have yet to be disrupted, but it's not like they're efficient. They've been disrupted because it's difficult to stop them. But having all of the people travel from one place, it takes a lot of time. It's not that efficient, and airplanes are not very good for the environment either. So it will be disrupted. And looking at the disruptions, like the onset of battery technology will disrupt travel greatly, and it will create a world where in our lifetimes, everybody will be able to access travel far easier in all parts of the world than they could do so before COVID, or certainly at the moment. Looking at cars, so cars are very inefficient. Driverless cars will be twice as fast and potentially 10 times as cheap. And that will fuel a lot of travel from urban destinations to non-urban destinations in the domestic market, because it'll be cheaper and easier to travel. Air travel and airports, so not a very efficient way of traveling, as I mentioned. And so VTOL electric aircraft, which are aircrafts that can land vertically, which are being rapidly developed in the last 5 years, and some very good footage on YouTube of the leaders in the space. Elon Musk is certainly one, will become much more popular. And some people believe by as soon as 2030. It could be a bit further out, but certainly helipads all over your country, meaning you can land wherever you want to land far more efficient for the economy and far cheaper than traditional airlines is something that's in our future. And then lastly, long haul travel. So reusable rockets. I saw recently that I think SpaceX's last rocket that landed exploded after 8 minutes. So they're not quite there yet. Musk believes they'll be there by 2030, but I believe it may take a little bit longer. But if you can imagine a world where you can go from London to Sydney in 1 hour, or even as little as 30 minutes, and I think, you know, as soon as the rockets stop exploding, it'll be very cost effective. I can't imagine getting a 747 from London to Sydney and the airplane exploding when you get there and not being able to use it again being viable. But certainly this is something that's in our future. So the future of travel, international travel, we'll have a vaccine passport. Countries that have vaccinated faster will recover quicker. And I think we will see a little bit of a recovery in Q3 of this year for those countries that are ahead in this program. But ultimately, 2022 will see a return to international travel when airlines start to get their planes back in the sky. And to Pierre's point, when the allocation of occupancy on those planes starts to increase. At the moment, what we're seeing is a very strong domestic and the return of the staycations. So we're seeing a domestic travel boom. So I'm sure in all your markets, what you're seeing is that your customers are coming from your own domestic market. Family and larger group travel is seeing huge growth at the moment. I think it's much easier to convince 10 of your friends to go on a road trip to somewhere in your own country than it is to convince them to go to an international travel break for the reasons that I mentioned on the last slide. And so what we've seen is much larger groups have been traveling, and we've definitely seen that in Nestor in our book of business. Homes versus hotels, because the demographic of the traveler is domestic and changing to larger groups and families, people are looking for places where they can cook, clean, entertain themselves, and be together in their own bubble. So again, homes are much more popular than hotels, and the market cap of Airbnb since it went on the stock market is I guess, a vote of confidence in the alternative accommodation for what we can expect to see now and in the future. And also some of the slides that Pierre was commenting on, it's a clear indication that this is the boom area of growth, which is good news for property managers on this call and for businesses like ourselves here at Nestor. A longer domestic staycation season. So I'm broadcasting from Ireland, where it's very, very wet at the moment. And typically in Ireland it tends to rain 12 months of the year, but 6 months are heavier than the summer. And people tend to go on international breaks during that time. So at the moment, the peak season is very much condensed and very, very busy and very expensive, as it is in many domestic staycation markets in Europe and the world. So what you find is that people are willing to travel outside of peak season domestically because international travel is more difficult to access, if possible at all, during COVID. So it's really important that you have your pricing plans for shoulder season, and you can expect a very bullish shoulder season, particularly at the end of your season, your peak season. A lead time reduction in stays, so even for urban and non-urban, we've seen a great reduction in lead time in Nestor. It's essentially kind of gone to about 4 or 5 days in urban markets, down from around 21 days. Digital nomads, so as we know, business travel is starting to struggle. Working from home trend is set to continue with big corporate companies allowing incentivizing people to work from home, medium and long term, and people who want nicer homes to work in with strong Wi-Fi and a nice office environment. So strategies to navigate change. So rate plans and pricing. Smart pricing is more important than ever with the lead time reducing, especially if you want to benefit from the push in non-refundable rates. Research coming from the main OTAs at the moment is suggesting there's a massive boom in non-refundable rates, a 4x conversion, and lots of users are sorting by non-refundable rates. One of the benefits is you will get more traffic. The flip side is you'll have more cancellations, but with a shorter conversion for lead time, you've got a very good chance of picking that cancelled booking up and rebooking it. Widen your rate plans to make sure you cater for medium and long-term stays. This is something we've done in Nestor, and I can touch later in the Q&A. A low touch check-in experience, more than ever, people are looking for self check-ins. It's become more and more popular. And again, in Nestor, all of our blocks are self check-in. And direct booking strategy, particularly for digital nomads, which I'll touch on the next slide. But in Nestor, one of the biggest segments of growth we've seen, particularly in urban destinations, has been our ability to run motions for extending people's direct bookings. And last year, typically your direct booking rate would have been about 20%. In Q1 of this year, we saw a 71% direct booking rate, fueled mainly by our ability to convince digital nomads to stay longer in nice accommodations in urban hubs. So appealing properties for families, groups, and digital nomads. So this may seem like common sense, but it's really important to make sure that your location and the description is key. So how far are you from the local activities? Because people will want to know what they can do in their domestic market when they get there, versus sometimes in international travel, you're going to see the big landmarks. When people holiday domestically, it's very much an activity-based model. They're staying for longer. They want to know what they can do. Impeccable cleaning, particularly with COVID, is very important. So you should highlight that. In-house entertainment in the past could have been Wi-Fi. Now it needs to be Netflix, Amazon Prime, Xbox for the kids. Pet friendly. Some people don't like pets in their accommodations, which I can understand, but it's important that you list the pet sitters in your areas. Most staycation markets in Europe, for example, have facilities where people can put their pets overnight. Local activities, again, a link to all local activities, discounts if you can do deals with those activity providers. Kitchen facilities, more important than ever. You know, on Airbnb, for example, having a hero shot of your kitchen is really important because people will want to cook in the accommodation for larger groups, not least because sometimes restaurants are closed. They may want to social distance or remain in their bubble. And similarly with a takeaway guide, it's really important for people to understand what takeaway options are available in your area close to your listing. And also if you can get discounts with local providers, that's very beneficial. Digital nomads, so we mentioned the change in business travel and a move towards working from home. For example, in London at the moment, in our service apartment blocks, Wi-Fi is very strong in the UK and in London in particular. But we added in Wi-Fi boosters to all of our apartments because there's a huge load on Wi-Fi with people working from home. They're downloading more than they were before. They're on conference calls like this one or webinars. So those Wi-Fi boosters are very important, and it's a good USP to have on your website. And then mention the fact that our direct booking has gone from 20 to 71%. And the reason for this is because digital nomads are very much likely, if they like the accommodation, to stay longer, and you can get that business back direct. And we built a CRM in Nestor, so we're very much geared up for direct business, which is a real plus at this moment in time. I think also just to mention that the style of accommodation that people are looking for, going back to homes versus hotels, in London, the occupancy for hotels in Q1 was approximately 15%. At Nestor, we had an occupancy of 80% for our service apartment blocks in the centre of London. So whilst demand was depressed, there was high demand for 1, 2, and 3 bed serviced apartments that could cater for digital nomads in the centre of London. And we managed to ride that wave very well, and it's very much part of our expansion plan, which I'll touch on later. So that's it from me. Cater for digital nomads, families, international travel to make a slow recovery, and make sure that you have a direct business strategy for extending bookings for your digital nomads. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Robin. And last but not least, Travis.
Thanks so much, Nestor, Pierre, and Amiad. Thank you for having me. My name is Travis Riner. I lead the Homes and Villas by Marriott International business for the US and Canada. So I'm going to share a few things with you today about our business and about some of the trends that we've been seeing in this time of COVID. So just for those of you who don't know much about us, we are a curated platform of premium and luxury homes. We have a global footprint. We really lean into the Marriott International master brand here. We've highlighted a few stats here just to shape up the size of the company here. We have a long history of hospitality being the backbone of our business, a large portfolio of hotels, 30 brands, and the real power of our ecosystem being the Marriott Bonvoy program. So 147 million Marriott Bonvoy members that fuel our hotels and now our short-term rental business, Homes and Villas by Marriott International. We are, as we said, a digital platform. So we work directly with professional property managers. We do not work with individual homeowners. We think that property managers, in particular our professional property managers, will be able to meet the needs of our customers. It also works from a technology perspective to connect to Homes and Villas using channel management systems. So we are a digital platform. We are continuing to grow to meet the needs and wants of our Marriott Bonvoy members. Most of our stays at this point have been through that Marriott Bonvoy program, and we have really leaned into this being a program that is additive to our hotel business and that allows our members to stay with us when they require this type of accommodation. So how we're different, I think there's a few points here to mention. We are curated, so we only take a hand-picked selection of the homes that each of our hand-picked professional property managers bring to us. And so we focus mainly on sort of the ski and sea destinations in the US and Canada. We have a few urban destinations, but we have an awful lot of traditional vacation rental markets. We bring about 40% of those markets are new to Marriott International, or we don't currently have a hotel. So we are really leaning into curation. We provide a sense of comfort for our guests to know that we have taken the time to curate the homes and the partners to make sure that those partners will be able to meet the high standards of cleanliness and safety, service, and the availability of 24/7 support when a customer is on that trip purpose, that vacation. We're also very careful to be in compliance with local regulations. We're trying to do this very much in the same way that we've done our hotel business, which is to maintain an excellent reputation and lean into high standards. We do, as I mentioned before, make sure that the customer has a stress-free travel experience. We have 24/7 support, of course, as we mentioned earlier about Wi-Fi being important. We have high-speed Wi-Fi kitchens, fully equipped kitchens, in-unit laundry, and then of course, all of the family-friendly conveniences. And then again, the most important thing here is the ability to earn and redeem Marriott Bonvoy points while you are working towards your elite status. You're earning points and being able to have professionally managed vacation rentals to meet that need when you require it. Here are a few trends that we're seeing since summer 2020, when we started to see some recovery. We've seen an increased booking volume in drive to ocean and mountain destinations. That's typically the US market has seen an awful lot of drive market demand. Strong demand on premium homes in the $100 to $500 per night range. And we are seeing an awful lot of questions about cleanliness, and our customers are very careful to make sure that they are experiencing a safe and clean environment with a short-term rental booking. Similar to the trends that Pierre mentioned as well, the shortened booking window. We've seen that shrink. It was a traditionally long booking window, now down from about 6 to 30 days. And then, again, our Marriott Bonvoy members really fueling our business at this moment with about 90% of our bookings, and 30% of those bookings are points redemptions, which is great for our program because, we have a lot of people who have built up status and points over years and years of hotel travel. And this is just another way that they can redeem those points to the benefit of their families during this time when they need to travel and feel that they have some privacy and security. Wanted to highlight the growth that we've seen. So we launched in May 2019, coming up on 2 years here. We'll be we're at 25,000 homes now in 241 destinations. And again, 40% of those destinations are new to Marriott International. So this is, again, it's an additive business to our core hotel business. It allows our customers to experience these places that are traditional vacation rental markets in places where a traditional hotel may not be supported by the demand or by the seasonality of those locations. So this has been a big win for our Marriott customers, and we are continuing to grow this business as we go. And then what's next for Marriott Homes and Villas by Marriott International? We're going to be continuing to go into new markets. We're going to continue to expand the business. We're listening to our customers. We want to go where they want to travel. And so we are actively seeking professional property managers in new destinations, and we are actively seeking professional property managers to deepen inventory in existing markets so that we continue to provide that range, that depth and breadth of choice that our customers would like to have. We're also making some advancements in efficiency to get property managers on faster with us. When we started, our lead time was quite long to get property managers on, and now we've reduced that by at least half and continued to work to make it easier for property managers to list homes with us. And that's it for me. Looking forward to the Q&A section. If you'd like to contact us, you can contact us at homesandvillas@marriott.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Travis, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your insights. Let's kick things off with our panel discussion. Maybe a question for all of you panelists. We all know hosts who have had to adopt to cater to the new guest expectations that emerged during the pandemic, a prominent one being to accommodate flexible cancellation policies. Our survey respondents were pretty split down the middle as to whether or not property management companies will have to continue providing flexible cancellation policies for permanently changed consumer base once COVID is behind us. What is your stance on this? Maybe we'll start with you, Robin.
Thanks, Amy. I think it makes sense to have a non-refundable and a refundable rate and price them accordingly based on the what you're looking to achieve. What we've seen at Nestor is that having a non-refundable rate has definitely driven conversion, and it's been a very worthwhile experience for us. Similarly, even though there's been an uptick in cancellations, because the lead booking window has shortened so much, we've managed to refill those bookings anyway. So for me, it's a definite yes for a non-refundable rate for now. Beyond now in the future, I think it's something that will stay. And I think it's just really important that you have your rates priced accordingly. So charge more for your non-refundable by all means. And if people want to book it, then so be it.
So in OTAs like Booking.com, you have rate plans with both types of cancellation policies. You see other channels acting accordingly and adding these options for short-term rentals?
Yeah, correct. And at the moment, there's a lot of people who are sub-sorting typically by price and availability and Wi-Fi, but they're sub-sorting by show me refundable rates. So it's very important to have both.
Perfect. What do you think about this, Pierre?
I think Robin bring an interesting point. I think it should be a data-driven decision. So, like you say, if lead time is very short and you can resend whatever got canceled, I think it's a good strategy. In general, I would say look at the benchmark, right? I mean, if everybody is flexible and you're the only one not doing it, you're probably missing out, right? And if you're in a market that lead time are actually much larger and for whatever reason, potentially the others are not applying, any flexible, you can actually remain on your position. I would try to make it data driven and look at what's happening in your local market for that one.
Anything to add on this, Travis?
Yeah, I think that flexible cancellation policies are here to stay. I think giving the customer the range of choice is going to be crucial going forward. And so we've had a 10-day flexible cancellation policy on since about maybe 10 months ago. And we still have that on through the summer as of right now. So I think it'll be here to stay for a little while.
Cool. I would just add as well, Amy, for property managers who are in non-urban destinations who are not used to running a refundable cancellation policy, you can possibly get away with it for peak season for those 2 or 3 months or that 8 to 12 weeks where it's really busy. But to make sure you capture the occupancy in shoulder season, you absolutely should have a non-refundable and a refundable offering for the guests.
Perfect. And I do want to ask the next question about more of the migration of hotels. So how do you think hotels will further incorporate alternative accommodations and short rentals into their business models? Robin, you started adding any multi-unit inventory at Nestor?
Yeah, sure. I think we sure have. Yeah, I think I see alternative accommodation as almost like a disruptor in the travel space, similar to what Stripe is for payments or SpaceX is for space technology. So I think it's here to stay. It's going to grow really quickly. And I think hotels realize that they have to get involved. So you see Marriott and Hilton and all the big hotel brands expanding their offering. I think what they'll try and do is they'll try and elevate the level of consistency in the alternative accommodation space, like Marriott is doing, or Airbnb Plus, by trying to address maybe what they see as weaknesses in the alternative accommodation consistency model, and they'll try and use that as a USP to enter the market.
Yeah, and maybe as a follow-up for you, Travis, what made Marriott decide it was the right time to branch out to private rentals back in 2019?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that we did enter this business prior to COVID by several months. So this is a business that we wanted to be in. And the reason for that is that our customers were telling us that this is a place that they wanted us to be. They gave us permission to enter this space. We saw that about 30% of our customers in our Marriott Bonvoy program were leaving us at least once a year to have a short-term rental experience. And so, we saw it as an opportunity to capture that demand that we saw leaving us for other platforms. So for us, it's been a pre-COVID desire to get into this business. And now, we continue to grow this business based on the demand that our customers are telling us that they want us to do.
And maybe as a follow-up question on that, how are you managing guest expectations for stays at homes? And how does that differ from hotel stays that you have in your other brands?
Yeah, it is different, right? I mean, each home is so uniquely different. Whereas when you stay at one of our traditional brands, no matter where you are, you can pretty much expect the same consistent experience. So it has been a bit of a customer education on particularly people who have not tried vacation rentals before. But it is, I think it's just going to take some time for customers to experience it and learn. We all probably remember the first time we stayed in a vacation rental as opposed to a hotel. And, there's an awful lot of positive things about staying in a vacation rental for that particular trip purpose. You think about the kitchen and the extra space to share with your family and extended family. I think that the positives outweigh the potential, trepidation that these customers might have about a vacation rental experience.
Perfect. Thank you. Next one is for you, Pierre. We saw some interesting data about pricing when we reviewed the responses from our survey, mostly indicating that pricing strategies are all over the place, with some planning to raise prices and demand increases, and some planning to lower them to attract that demand. What do you think is an ideal strategy to implement as travel normalizes, and when do you expect traditional pricing patterns to resume?
All right, that's a tough one. Look, I think one key, and I think everybody sort of implemented these measures due to high volatility, was to track and try to adjust pricing based on demand and pacing. I think what we've seen as a very successful strategy is basically looking at how fast you're pacing, so how fast you're getting reservations, potentially compared to previous years or even to last year, and decide if you want to maintain high rates or drop your rates based on your own occupancy or potentially the occupancy of your markets if you have market data, right? So instead of having a very rigid strategy looking at what was seasonality in 2019 or what you expected to be this year, I would try to make it very reactive to the actual demand you see, and that will, in my opinion, help you optimize it. So concretely, if you see a lot of reservation coming, I would tell you this should be a sign to give you confidence and maintain high rates and basically react really compared to pacing. And if you just have a few units, which may happen, in that case, try to look at what happens in general in the market, right? So if there's 500 properties that are similar to yours, how many got booked in the last 7 days? How many got booked in the last 30 days, right? For a certain period. And for that period, if you still confidence that this trend is solid, then you can hold on your rate. And if not, I would invite you to revise and be a little bit more flexible and probably decrease rate. That would be, in my opinion, the best pricing strategy right now is to look at occupancy based, variation.
So Less about market exposure, more about your own occupancy and adjust accordingly as you fill your room rentals, right?
Correct.
Perfect.
Which is hard if you have a few units and they're all very unique. It's hard. That's why it helps to look at market data. And even if you have 100 units, then you have enough of your own units, so you can try to price them as a portfolio, and that helps. But for everyone else, I would tell that looking at a good benchmark is very helpful for that.
Perfect. And back in September, you did predict that the industry will gain from this crisis in the long term. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our theory is very simple. We think that our type of industry has basically been able to react very fast to the pandemic. We were the first to reopen. It's much easier to open a rental than a hotel. Hotel is a big infrastructure cost. There's more employees, etc. And I think it's harder for them to reopen. So I think we've got a nice competitive advantage. And what happened with the pandemic is that a lot of travelers who would have not normally considered neither a domestic destination nor a rental have had to consider that for their own trip. So overall, I think we've gained, a new market. And once the international demand is back, this will just have increased our total addressable market. And in my opinion, this is very positive. And another sign, and I think again, the Airbnb IPO is a very good sign for the industry, because now it puts us, in the mind of every institutional sort of investor, and also for a lot of the policymakers. I think this is a big change, and I think it's going to help the industry grow overall. So we come from growing 30% year on year. We had to halt this growth because of COVID, but I feel like once travel resumes, we will be in a much better position even. So that's sort of our theory.
And perfect segue for my next one about expansion. So this one is for you, Robin. We found out that overwhelmingly number of property management companies responded to our survey plan to expand this upcoming year. As the head of expansion at Nestor, can you share any of your plan for growth, and how are those have been impacted by the recent developments with the vaccine?
Sure, I think it's a good sign of the people on the call that everybody's ambitious and wants to expand in such a difficult time. And at Nestor, we're no different. And I think there's a couple of key points that we would look at. One is that in markets where we're already strong, so let's imagine London, Dublin, and some markets in Spain, where we understand the supply type. So the shift in supply has been very much towards high-end service apartments that are digital nomad capable. We will expand there where it makes sense, because we understand those markets very well. And we've already added several blocks to our portfolio in this year and in the coming summer in those markets. Beyond that, I think what's interesting is the emerging markets, which tend to get forgotten in a crisis like we're in now. And the time to move into emerging markets is, halfway through a crisis, not at the end. So we've seen some good value in the Middle East and Africa as well. So very much my focus at the moment is trying to work with the leadership team at Nestor to set up an entity in those markets and take on some blocks that we think are a really good value at this point in time, and will be better value again in the coming 1 to 2 years. So focus on the right supply type in the markets. One aspect of expansion is that there are a lot of property managers who are tired, who've got like 10 to 50 properties, and who feel like it's a really uncertain time. And we're very happy to bring those companies into our brand and do revenue shares or take them over outright as well. And so we've had some success in emerging and tier one markets in hoovering up some of those property managers into our brand.
Wow, doing M&A in this time, very interesting. So maybe additional question on the hit, and especially in London where you guys are based. So with a new trend of virus being referred to as the UK variant, London was definitely hit particularly hard. How has Nestor met these challenges, and what lessons have you learned from them moving forward? And I think this will be our last question before we open it up for the audience questions. So stay with us. Thank you, Rob.
Sure. I remember smiling when it was called the coronavirus because of the impact it had on Corona, which is the largest beer in the world. And I was smiling again when the president of the US at the time called it the Chinese virus for the impact it had on the Chinese economy. But I wasn't smiling when they called it the UK variant, because our business is based primarily in the UK, in London. So it did have an impact. It's not nice, first of all, just having that name associated with a variant. But I think for us, it was Well, I mentioned earlier that hotels ran at about 20% occupancy or even less in Q1. At Nestor, we've been focused on service apartments for some time. So our occupancy was actually around 80%. So what we did is we doubled down on what we're really good at, which is mid to high end service apartments that are really good demographic for digital nomads. And we also, our expansion plan is the same. So we've actually benefited very well from this. And the domestic market has been very strong for us. And we also believe, because of the vaccination and where the UK is similar to Israel and the UAE in the Middle East, that it's going to recover quicker. And international bookings are already starting to come in for the late summer and next year. So the right supply, the right location, and just going back on the pricing point, smart pricing I mentioned earlier. Be brave with your pricing, and a smart pricing tool allows you to do that. And not Airbnb, smart pricing, an actual tool that works. So it is really important to be brave with your pricing. It's really important to be flexible with your rate plans, and it's really important for people who are staying for a long period of time to have a direct booking strategy to try and encourage them to stay longer. And one last point, Emily, is that medium to long-term bookings have been a huge part of our portfolio this year. It reduces your cleaning costs, it reduces your ops costs. That booking is much higher. So getting those bookings is really important, and having a rate plan and a strategy that covers is really important. We've added a lot of medium-term OTAs like Spot a Home that drive longer stay demand than Booking.com, Airbnb, and Expedia do as well to our portfolio, and that's worked really well.
Perfect. And on that note, before we take questions from the audience, I'd like to leave you with one last bit of data from our survey that highlights that year ahead will be one of a hyper growth, not just a year of growth. And overwhelmingly majority of the property management companies and the companies that we have surveyed plan to expand the number of listings in their portfolio in 2021. The industry took a hit from COVID-19, but if our survey made one thing clear, it's that the sheer resilience of our space. We'll all come out of COVID stronger together. So I hope that put some good intention in, or good empathy in our heart and for recovery. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. Let's start with the first one, and that's from Grayson Gaylor. Curious what regulatory trends you guys see coming. Example, as short-term rentals owner, are we going to be required to have licenses or pay for hospitality training? Let's start with you, Robin, especially since Nestor has gone through many of them.
Yes, and at my time in Airbnb also. So I think that I think Pierre mentioned that the regulatory landscape is becoming a bit more tolerant of short-term rentals, I would say, and less restrictive, because they're so important to the GDP of tourism. So I think it depends on your market, but I think the outlook is more positive than it was before COVID. And I think it will decelerate the amount of regulation we will see in key markets.
Perfect. Pierre, anything to add on that? Do you see regulation affecting your data already in some of those places?
Yeah, it's a hard question because it's hyper local, and we've seen a lot of regulation go a lot of different ways. I think everything has sort of been put on hold during COVID, and in general, policymakers take a lot of time to react to changes, and I think it's a little early to see exactly how the impact will be after COVID. But in my opinion, and that's just my intuition, is it should be actually positive, because not only vacation rental have been impacted by the crisis, but everybody in real estate, and I think this may actually come as an interesting alternative for a lot of voters, and I think policymakers will potentially take that into consideration. So overall, I'm with Robin, and I think it will come out positive.
Perfect. And by the way, my team is telling me that because we're short on time, some of your questions from the audience has been answered inside the Zoom answers. We do have time for a few more, so let's jump to a question from Jazz Ray. I am considering focusing on driving distance properties versus locations that require flights. Do the pros think I should keep the faith and hold Hawaii, or liquidate and move to other hot areas that we are not negatively impacted by the travel shift? What do you guys are thinking?
I think for me, it depends.
Sorry, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, it depends on the time horizon for the return on your investment, but I think certainly for me, I think I'm a bit more pessimistic in terms of a full recovery than maybe some of the people who voted in because of the because of the barrier to international travel, particularly for the age of people who are over the age of 50. There'd be a bias towards not taking international trips. That tends to happen after pandemics. So I would be tempted to, if your time horizon is short, to stick with the stuff that you can drive to, and maybe park the stuff in Hawaii. Now I'm based in Ireland where it rains all the time, so Hawaii sounds great to me, but I won't have no ability to get there. So yeah, I'd be tempted to go short term.
Just a quick take from Israel, since we are mostly vaccinated here in our headquarters, where we see people getting vaccinated. A lot of it is already building a very strong pent-up demand for international travel. So I can say that once countries and people become more and more vaccinated, we will definitely see more of these flights being fully booked. There is a pent-up demand already for April and afterwards, where many countries have announced that they will work with the Green Passport initiative. So we definitely are thinking maybe not to offload some of these properties, but maybe work with your owners on setting expectations on the recovery date.
Right. Maybe I can add to that. I don't know exactly where the property is located in Hawaii, because I know regulation varies a little bit over there as well. But if you're in a well-regulated area and your rentals are all in line with that, I'm actually very positive. I've seen that some corridors of flights have reopened, and Hawaii was one of them. And I know reservation are starting to come back pretty strongly. So I would say this is still a very attractive market, and I know there's a lot of demand for it. So I would be positive on Hawaii as long as you're in a place where you feel confident with regulation and all the rest.
Perfect. We do have time for just one last question. So I'll take this one from Mike Ortegon. Your data showed that inventory remained steady and even grew in some areas. We heard from many partners, property managers, and owners that they were moving properties from short stay to longer term. What is your hypothesis on why the steady state? Maybe Pierre wants to answer that, and I'll add from Guesty's data later on.
Sounds good. Yeah. So Mike, look, the inventory, it's a good question. In our opinion, there's few reasons why we think it remains steady. One is also how we define it. Basically, what we consider active is basically that it's still on the platform. What we see a lot of people do is like look for temporary options, and I think Robin, you've mentioned, doing some midterm rental. So if you look like hotels occupied at 20% in London and you guys are at 80s, because you find ways to fill in the properties, and not all of it comes from short-term rental. Maybe you get some midterm rental and all of that. What it doesn't mean is that properties have been taken off completely from the OTAs. You don't want to lose your reviews, for instance. So instead of shutting down the account, you're just gonna block the calendar for a few months because you're running out somewhere. But the hope is to come back. So that's what we see overall, and we've also seen some inventory growth. Like crisis has impacted everybody, and I think some people who didn't do rentals before have started to do it. And I think that's a message of hope for everybody out there. I think there's a lot of opportunities to gain new inventory and find new properties to manage, because a lot of things are unsure at the moment, and it's an opportunity to go out and find new units, or even like Amiad, like you mentioned earlier, like finding entire units or hotels that are not doing well and suggesting them to go and manage them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for those who know how to find them, and especially in the multi-unit and on some markets where everybody's distressed, and it's great opportunities. So I'd say that's one explanation. Along with
Guesty data,
from
Guesty data, what we're seeing is a lot of the times, even companies that went out of business did migrate their inventory to other companies as part of their closing or shutting down. A lot of the times inventory is being transitioned to longer term or midterm, but they still keep it on operating, especially for getting reservations after that property coming back to market. And if you remember, it's a year now of being in COVID. So a lot of these long-term contracts are ending as we speak, and we're seeing a lot of those coming back to market. And we're seeing a lot of growth in that front as well, especially in the Guesty data. We are definitely encouraged from what we're seeing. A lot of the properties have been converted to quarantine apartments or for other types of uses that weren't really popular pre-COVID and now are being really creative with how they lease their properties. Maybe before we conclude, I did want to give you two final slides here. One is, if you were intrigued by our data presented here today, there's a lot more where that came from. I invited you all to download the free report. It's about 46 pages where you can read about our respondents' perspective on everything from industry consolidation and pricing strategies to the people and destinations that will be the first to experience travel in post-COVID world and so much more. Be sure to check out the report for some truly compelling insight to the future of our industry. And finally, before we conclude, I'd like to encourage you all to think about international travel and purchase your tickets for this year's Guestival, set to take place in September 22nd, which promises to be our most innovative event yet. It's in a real life, it's not just an online event. So think about it. We do have a very flexible cancellation policy for it. And I can tell you that there's a lot of people already booking. So think about that. And lastly, I want to thank everyone who joined us today, and thank you so much for our panelists. We look forward to seeing everyone at the many upcoming virtual events that we have planned for the short-term rental community, all of which we'll be posting on our events page here at Guesty.com. Please don't hesitate to reach out to meetup@Guesty.com with any other question you may have. Thank you everyone for joining.